Peace, peace, family. Listen, we is back. I ain't even gonna lie to you. I was about to hop off this motherfucker, start editing this previous video, and then I scrolled down on YouTube and I seen this shit that just came out 2 hours ago, and just the title by itself looked priceless. Tapper asks Fauci, "Do you think lives could have been?" Let me hover over it. "You think lives could have been saved?" Question mark. I ain't look at the video yet, but this shit looks interesting. Let's get to it.
If I gave you an automated Amazon business that made you $100,000 per month.
And last time we spoke on this show, you told me that in order to eventually be able to loosen the stay-at-home and social and physical distancing restrictions, the United States would need testing in place for, quote, knowing real time if a person is infected.
The first thing these motherfuckers said was, "Fauci, didn't you just say in order for the country to go back to normal, we are going to need testing for everyone to know if they've been infected or not?" Unless I heard that shit wrong, let's wind it back. It's only been 15 seconds. Let's run it back.
And last time we spoke on this show, you told me that in order to eventually be able to loosen the stay-at-home and social and physical distancing restrictions, the United States would need testing in place for, quote, knowing real time if a person is infected and then getting them out of circulation and contact tracing, unquote. When do you think the U.S. will have that capacity nationwide for that kind of testing?
You know, Jake, we really can't guarantee every area of the country, but what we're told by the companies and the people who are getting the antibody test, which doesn't tell you if a person is infected, it tells you if they've been infected. And that's going to be important when you think about getting people back into the workplace. But the other point, which is important.
All right, so I had to pause it right there because if you've been watching my videos, the previous video, I just did a reaction video, basically about the antibody test that they were trying to get everybody to have so that they can go back to work. And in the video, they was pricking niggas outside the car and shit. Okay. Basically, I was saying it sounded like the regular test. Well, Fauci just said it's not. It just shows if you've been sick. So y'all basically was gonna pay $10. Who y'all remember in the last video, gonna pay $10 to find out if you've been sick or not. It's not to find out if you've been sick or not for you. It's for them to find out if you've been sick or not. Now they know who to make sick or not. Y'all ever think about that? Just an idea. Let's keep it going.
If you start, and when one starts, to relax some of those restrictions, we know that there will be people who will be getting infected. I mean, that is just reality. The critical issue is to be able to, in real time, identify, isolate, and contact trace. That's called containment. Right now, in places like New Orleans and in New York City, we're in mitigation.
Like me.
You mentioned the governors. This is really important. I've spent this week on the phone with a considerable number of governors, some of which I believe are going to be on your program later on. They are really important. I'm deeply impressed about how much they care about the
He said them governors that's about to be on your show, really important. He smiled about it. I wonder who those people might be. And depending on who those people might be, might have to go do some research, seeing what type of connection they had previously.
balance of preserving the health of their citizens in their state at the same time as they cautiously do this re-entry. So, I have confidence that with the help that we can do federally from the federal government to the fact that the states are really committed to doing it right, I think that combination hopefully is going to get us to where we want to be.
Based on what you know right now, when do you think the country will be ready to take some of these steps to reopen based on the availability of testing? When do you see that happening?
Jake, that's a great question. And that's really what I was inferring when I said a rolling reentry. It is not going to be a light switch that we say, okay, it is now June, July, or whatever, click, the light switch goes back on. It's going to be depending where you are in the country, the nature of the outbreak that you've already experienced, and the threat of an outbreak that you may not have experienced. So it's going to having to look at the situation in different parts of the country. Obviously, New York, who went and is going through a terrible ordeal, is going to be very different from Arkansas, and you'll hear from the governor shortly, and very different maybe from some places on the West Coast, like Washington State, which have been successfully able to prevent that big spike. I think it's going to have to be something that is not one size fits all.
When do you think it could start?
I think it could probably start, at least in some ways, maybe next month. And again, Jake, it's so difficult to make those kinds of predictions because they always get thrown back at you if it doesn't happen. Not by you, but by any of a number of people. We are hoping that at the end of the month we could look around and say, okay, is there any element here?
The reason why this man just said that is because everyone has been saying, why does this shit keep getting pushed further and further back? When is this peak coming? This peak has always it's been coming for what? 4-5 weeks now? Like, damn. When you gonna get there? How long it's gonna take for it to come? You know what I'm talking about. All I'm saying is, man trying to backtrack and save his ass because he know that's what people fucking saying. Why is it taking so long? When is this so-called peak actually coming? Sound like some weird shit to me.
That we can safely and cautiously start pulling back on. If so, do it. If not, then just continue to hunker down. And that's what, at least from the standpoint of the public health aspect, that we look at. Other decisions are going to have to be made at the level of the president and the governors about what they are going to do with all of the information they get. The only thing I and my colleagues in public health and medicine can do is to give a projection of the kinds of things that may or may not happen when you make these steps.
Yeah, that's all his colleagues can do. Sure. What they can do is have their opinion be the heaviest weight and hold the heaviest weight in the entire world. And because it holds the heaviest weight, they can alter legislation to make things happen, such as mandatory vaccinations, mandatory testing. This man is underplaying the power that he now holds due to this corruption and this rigged system of checks and balances, especially within this health organization.
And I know you're concerned about the idea of what happens if it happens too quickly, prematurely, and then precipitously the U.S. or that area of the U.S. goes back to a dire situation. The University of Washington professor Chris Murray, who I know you're familiar with his work, he runs the model frequently cited by your task force. He told CNN that he is worried that if the country opens up too soon, quote, the risk of rebound is very great. And according to his model, when it comes to stay-at-home and social and physical distancing measures, quote, if we were to stop at the national level by May 1st, we are seeing a return to almost where we are now sometime in July. Do you agree with him? And what happens if parts of the country try to go back to some semblance of normal, but the testing and contact tracing capacity is not there?
Well, I mean, Chris is a very good modeler, and we relied on him heavily to give us some capability of making some projections. But I believe what they were referring to in that model, Jake, and it's important, is I agree. That's why I said a few moments ago, if you just say, okay, it's whatever, May 1st, click, turn the switch on. Obviously, if you do it in an all or none way, there's an extraordinary risk of there being a rebound. So in that respect, that model is correct. And that's why I mean it is not an all or none. It's going to be something that you gradually and carefully, in different parts of the country, in different ways, try to get back. I totally agree if that all of a sudden we decide, okay, it's May whatever, and we just turn the switch on, that could be a real problem. And everybody knows that. So it's going to be something different from that. It's going to be a concerted way to take a look and try it doing it appropriately, depending upon where you are in the country and what the nature of the outbreak is in that part of the country. And I'm sure you'll hear the same thing from the governors.
South Korea and the U.S. announced their first confirmed coronavirus cases at virtually the same time in late January. If you take a look at where we are right now in the U.S. now has 50 times more cases and almost 100 times more fatalities than South Korea. Meanwhile, while the U.S. makes up only about 4.25% of the world's population, the U.S. has 30% of the world's reported coronavirus cases and almost 20% of the reported coronavirus deaths.
I know what that is. Because this virus exposed basically where nations stand as far as health. We're one of the most unhealthy countries there is. That virus exposed it. The heart conditions, the diabetes, obesity, shit. It is what it is. That's just what it came down to be.
Sanjay Gupta said this is all because we got started too late in the U.S. Is that right? Do you agree?
You know, it isn't as simple as that, Jake. I'm sorry. I mean, to just say this is all happening because we got started too late. Obviously, if you look, could you have done something a little bit earlier? Would have had an impact, obviously. But where we are right now is the result of a number of factors. The size of the country, the heterogeneity of the country. I think it's a little bit unfair to compare us to South Korea, where they had an outbreak in Daegu and they had the capability of immediately, essentially, shutting it off completely in a way that we may not have been able to do in this country. So obviously, it would have been nice if we had a better head start, but I don't think you could say that we are where we are right now because of one factor. It's very complicated, Jake.
The New York Times reported yesterday that you and other top officials wanted to recommend social and physical distancing guidelines to President Trump as far back as the third week of February, but the administration didn't announce such guidelines to the American public until March 16th, almost a month later. Why?
You know, Jake, as I've said many times, we look at it from a pure health standpoint. We make a recommendation. Often the recommendation is taken. Sometimes it's not. But it is what it is. We are where we are right now.
Do you think lives could have been saved if social distancing, physical distancing, stay-at-home measures had started third week of February instead of mid-March?
You know, Jake, again, it's the what would have, what could have. It's very difficult to go back and say that. I mean, obviously, you could logically say that if you had a process that was ongoing and you started mitigation earlier, you could have saved lives. Obviously, no one is going to deny that. But what...
Listen, I ain't even going to let the rest of the fucking video play. Let me tell you how this shit could have been prevented. Shit could have been prevented by not allowing, or first investigating these so-called investment groups that are foreign and they come from competitive countries such as China. Like when the 1,000 Talents group decided to recruit Bill Gates, why didn't y'all look into it? The same people who invested in this guy who created all of this shit for us, I guess, Microsoft, they invested in this guy. The same company happened to be the same people who invested in the virus and had the chick pretending to be a college student at Harvard carrying this shit. Could have been prevented there. Could have been prevented by, you know, restricting a lot of shit going on with China. Honestly, could have been restricted by not fucking with niggas that's not really what we into. and not dependent on these niggas for manufacturing, because all of our shit says made in China. Now, when the world stopped, where are we getting our stuff from? That's how this shit could have been prevented. If these people ain't thinking like you, why are you dealing with them? If history shows that the mindset cannot be changed, why are we dealing with them? Help me understand. But that's where I'm in the video. It's just crazy. It's just crazy that they got this man on here. And like he said earlier in the video, he only has so much power. But as you can see right now, if I'm not mistaken, this is the State of the Union. I could be wrong, but you can see who's speaking right now. The floor is his, so like the spotlight is on this man. This is who they are coming to see where we are heading in the direction of the country right now. Not so much Trump as this moment. In this moment, that's a lot of power. All eyes on this man. That's a lot of power. That's all I'm saying. But yeah. Smash that like button. Subscribe. And until next video, man.